Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have a look at the latest from the live radar, one through the weather warnings, as we have numerous rain warnings still issued through the rest of today, but they should be expiring, and tomorrow we don't have any warnings issued. But as we see on the latest UKV, it is going to remain very unsettled, lots of heavy rain around, and also some gusty winds are possible in places, and it is going to be fairly mild with that. So temperatures for some in the south can even get into the low teens for the first time in at least a few weeks. As we're seeing the longer range though, that pattern is looking likely to continue for perhaps the next week to maybe 10 days. But we are now starting to see hints that as we progress towards around the 20th of December, we're going to see high pressure move in. And as we head towards the Christmas period, we're already seeing some runs pushing that high pressure northwards. That is something that a lot of the longer range runs are showing, which is high pressure blocking northerly or easterly winds developing as we progress towards Christmas and the New Year. We are starting to see hints of that today. The 6 a.m. run from the GFS today had a proper potent northerly wind arriving for Christmas Eve. Other runs, not so progressive, but all starting to show the hints of that high pressure building in and then trying to push northwards. So we will have a look at that in detail in the second half of the video. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, which you like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitter as well. The link's in the description. If you start on the live radar, you can see the big wall of rain that we've seen today is now slowly starting to clear through the east. Western areas are now dry and have been dry for a couple of hours, but the Far East still seeing that very heavy rain, and it is finally going to clear. And you can see where the sort of cold front is. It's this last edge of heavy rain that is eventually going to be sweeping through in the next sort of hour or so. Again, I say a cold front, it is bringing slightly fresher air compared to what was ahead of the front, but generally it's a lot milder than what we've had recently. Still got a little bit of snow over the higher ground of Scotland, but for most now, apart from the tops of the mountains in Scotland, it is now falling as rain. So milder air is in for all, and as I said, temperatures could be into the low teens in the coming days. If you do have a look at the temperatures, as just after 7, you can see still a little bit chilly in the east. We've still got some cold air trapped towards the surface. You can see out towards Europe, northern and western Europe, it's still pretty bitterly cold, but this milder air is sweeping in and will actually bring a lot of mild air to northern and western Europe in general over the next couple of days and in the next week or so. And you can see those yellows further westwards across Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest of England. Temperatures around the high single digits overnight tonight in those areas. If we do have a look at the past 24-hour precipitation, you'll be able to see that we've seen a lot of rainfall in places as this weather front moved through, and you can see why we've seen those numerous weather warnings. Wherever we've seen some sort of darker, some thicker yellows here, that's pretty much where we have seen the weather warnings. But widely, we've seen a lot of heavy rain, and again, not this individual event is going to cause any major flooding, but it's the fact that we're going to see back-to-back repeated bouts of heavy rain over the coming days in the next sort of week or so could progressively cause more and more issues, and that's something we do need to keep an eye on. If you look at the weather warnings, you can see we've got a warning across eastern Scotland does expire at midnight tonight, so in a few hours time, and again 80 to 110 millimetres possible, 30 to 50 millimetres in a few spots. Again, still raining there. Will probably still rain there for another few hours. So that's warning still very much intact. Warning across the far south of England expires in a couple of hours' time. But as we will see from the live radar, if we go back, most of the precipitation's actually cleared central southern England now. A bit of lingering in the far southeast, but central southern England. So that warning pretty much is redundant now, and this warning across parts of the Midlands expiring actually in about half an hour after I'm recording this, so again we won't look at this, but again, for heavy rain. Now if we have a look at the latest from the UKV, so it's showing over the course of the next 5 days, you can see the rain clearing to the east at the moment, and we'll continue to see a few showers into the morning before we do start to see some more heavy persistent bouts of showers. Again, I emphasise showers, it's not going to be raining all day, but some areas could see still quite a lot of heavy rain, especially further westwards. As we progress through Friday, that rain does clear, but then we see another batch of heavy rain, another wall of rain moving in for Saturday morning. So if you've got any plans for Saturday morning across England and Wales, it's looking likely to be a washout. And again, it's not just rain falling, it's heavy rain falling. It's going to be pretty miserable and horrible out there. And eventually, as that clears the afternoon further south, might not actually be too bad, but further northwards, more heavy rain moving in. Beyond that, into Sunday, another weather front moving in for Sunday afternoon, not quite as heavy, but still could give some persistent rain in places. And then as we progress into Monday, we see another area of rain move in, and again, more showery in nature, and that continues into Monday and Tuesday. If you look at the max temperatures, you can see overnight tonight temperatures widely above freezing, 6 to 8 degrees for many areas. By tomorrow afternoon, temperatures could just about get towards 10 or 11 in the south as the milder starts to reintegrate itself towards the surface. As we progress into Saturday, look at that, 7 or 8 degrees once again overnight, and into Saturday afternoon, more areas seeing 10, 11, 12 degrees. Again, doesn't sound exceptional, but it is a good few degrees above average for the time of year, and almost 10 degrees above what it was last week. Or last weekend. As we progress beyond that into Sunday, it could be chilly in a few spots in Scotland, but Sunday afternoon again could see 13 or 14 in the southwest, and into Monday again slightly cooler in places, 8 or 9, but still above average, and that continues into Tuesday, where we're still seeing high single digits or even 10, 11 degrees. Scotland though starting to cool down a little bit, but that is inevitable. Apart from sort of a direct southwesterly wind, Scotland is always going to be pretty chilly. It's the time of year. But you can see, if we just put in the upper air temperatures at the end of this, you can see a little bit of colder air filtering in. But for the most part, it is going to be fairly mild over the next week or so, with some bouts of chilly air, but really only in sort of sectors behind low pressure systems. If we do have a look at the longer range now, we'll be able to start to see the hints of that higher pressure moving in towards the end, or towards the middle of the month, and then potentially towards the end of the month, something a bit colder. If we do progress this GFS run, you can see westerly winds continue to move in over the coming days, and the next sort of week in general, so it's going to remain fairly unsettled and fairly mild. As we progress to sort of this time next week, we do start to see that high pressure move in. So for the middle of the month, high pressure is going to move in, could move in with some very warm air, maybe some cold air. I'm not 100% sure, it depends on the exact orientation of the high. Again, here the GFS initially builds in mild air with it, but cold air actually does filter in after a while, and you can see a bit of a slack easterly, see a bit of an inversion underneath that. As we'll see in a minute, the ECMWF actually has very warm upper air temperatures. That's the same pattern, but completely different upper air temperatures at the surface. Might not make much of a difference, but again, all dependent on exact wind direction. But this is where pretty much all the models get to around that day 10 period, where the high pressure firmly built over the top of us, and the stratospheric polar vortex, the very strong jet stream that we're seeing over the next few days, next week in general, starts to lose its strength. And look what happens as we head towards 384 hours. That high pressure is ridging towards Greenland, up towards the Arctic. We see a lobe of tropospheric polar vortex exit into Scandinavia. Again, not like we're going to see the polar vortex highly unlikely we see tropospheric polar vortex get towards the UK. That is a very rare occurrence, as it basically needs a direct northerly to see that. But what it does do by dropping into Eastern Europe and Scandinavia, where it can position itself, it just drags a lot of cold air out of the Arctic. And it means if we see a northerly or easterly, it'll be that much colder. And as we progress all the way to 384 hours, you continue to see that high pressure ridging northwards, splitting the polar vortex, and we're starting to see northeasterly winds developing, and you can see this, the high pressure penetrating to the Arctic, and the tropospheric polar vortex splitting up instead of being a big core like we're seeing over the coming week. You can see those blues are much more organised over the central Arctic, whereas right at the end of the run, split with some of it spilling out into the mid-latitudes. Again, this immediate GFS run, this 12 o'clock run, doesn't go bitterly cold here, definitely showing a colder evolution. But if we do have a look at the 6 o'clock run, which has a very similar evolution, but you can see it's a bit more progressive, and by the 23rd into the 24th of December, into the Christmas period, we're seeing a direct northerly, and actually a bit of the lobe of polar vortex heads our way. Bitterly cold air is spreading towards the UK. Again, the very cold air won't reach us. Northerly winds, especially early on in the season, do lose a lot of their intensity, but still get the very cold dew points. and generally still very cold air our way, just not quite as cold as this. We're not going to see the -15 isotherm in, for example. That would require an easterly wind. But you can see the potential equivalent temperature is bitterly cold. Temperature deviation well below average here. And again, it would turn very cold here for Christmas if this pattern came off. But that is a bit of a recurring theme we're starting to see within the GFS. Other models don't unfortunately actually have the opportunity to develop this, as it's all happening in the GFS around that day 10 to day 15 range. But as we see with the other models in a minute, they all get to that position where the high pressure is starting to nudge northwards around the middle of the month. So if we do have a look at the latest GM, again, you can see westerly winds coming in. That looks pretty much bang on now. And as we head into the middle of next week, high pressure builds in. Initially, the high pressure is slightly further southwards, so it will draw up some milder air and probably not see as much of an inversion. But by day 10, you can start to see that low stratospheric polar vortex heading towards Scandinavia, high pressure slowly edging northwards. Said here, it's actually very mild for the UK with a southwesterly wind. But you can start to see that split occurring with that low stratospheric polar vortex, and that high pressure is slowly edging up towards Greenland, pretty much getting towards where the GFS was around this day 10 period. Again, it's very difficult to see here, and you may just say, oh, it looks flat westerly here, but if you watch the positions of these lows, you can see that splitting is looking like it's beginning to occur, and you can see high pressure is starting to penetrate into the Arctic. So yes, it doesn't produce anything like the GFS does, but it potentially could do if we were able to run this on another couple of days. If you do compare to the ECMWF, again, it's actually very similar. Westerly winds coming in, high pressure builds in, and very strong southwesterly winds could go incredibly mild towards the middle of the month. But again, look at that low stratospheric polar vortex splitting into Scandinavia, and then the high pressure going up towards Greenland. You can see a split within the darker blues here from the 16th to the 17th, indicating higher pressure is moving in, and you can see that starting to develop here very quickly. High pressure starting to develop over Greenland, and it would start to try and draw a northerly or easterly wind. And even though here we are incredibly mild, the longer term evolution would definitely suggest those wind directions coming in perhaps more from the north and east. It's happened many times before where we go from extreme warmth to extreme cold when we do see those high pressure systems move northwards, as they do drag a lot of warm air with them inevitably, initially at least, before building that cold air or allowing that cold air to drop out of the Arctic. It is just how sort of the winters work. If we do see an area going well below average, other areas are likely to go well above average. This warm air will try to penetrate into the Arctic, and it could spill out that very cold air our way. At this stage, at this evolution, it's looking like it's heading towards Scandinavia, and that high pressure gets going over Greenland. It could head our way as well. We are seeing hints of this on the ensembles. If we look at the latest GFS, you can see there is a lot more colder runs developing now around that sort of 18th to 23rd of December. Again, nothing ridiculous at this stage, but definitely a cooling trend. More colder runs appearing than there were yesterday and the previous days. But for the next week in the reliable time frame, it's looking very up and down, generally mild with a lot of precipitation. 2 meter temperatures definitely dropping off in the longer term, so even if that bitterly cold sort of pattern that could be evolving doesn't occur at all, and it's a bit, we're completely wrong, regardless, it's still looking like it's cooling under that high pressure. Inversion is looking very possible. Perhaps apart from that ECMWF run that had a full-blown southwesterly around the high, most of the other runs, including the ensemble members, do have generally colder conditions at the surface. Dew points definitely dropping in the longer term, again indicating under the high pressure, cold air could get trapped, and of course could even see Arctic air move in with that northerly wind, especially in the long range. That is one of the big indications. A flat northerly or easterly wind is going to have very low dew points. So yeah, got to keep a very close eye on those dew points, and that will indicate where our air is coming from. Even here, dew points dropping close towards freezing would indicate the wind is coming off the near constant, so perhaps even a slack easterly flow around that high pressure is looking quite likely here with those dew points. And if we do finish by looking at the latest ECMWF, again, very similar, perhaps not quite as many cold runs in the longer term, but definitely a drying trend. And if we do have a look at the 2 meter temperatures, definitely cooling slightly in the longer term as well. Maybe not as much as the GFS, but definitely cooling. Again, this is the run from earlier today, so haven't had the 12 o'clock run out yet. So we'll have to see what that does show, but definitely has been a shift in the past day or so, just showing those cold revolutions in the longer term. I have said for a number of days we are expecting that to start to appear, and it looks like today we are starting to see those cold revolutions appearing, and we'll just have to see what happens over the coming days. If they do firm up, if we start to see more of a consistent pattern with them, and it'll probably be around the 15th of December time when we'll perhaps, so in about a week's time, when we'll perhaps start to know a lot more about what could be happening as we do progress into the festive period. So anyway, thanks for watching, hope you have enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.